Okay, good minute. Sir, I think where I left off, I was asking you about the pericardial sac, and you described there was a perforation in that sac in the body of Odin Lloyd,
Yes.
and you observed certain quantities of blood.
Yes, I did.
Okay. And just if you would describe what effect those quantities of blood would have in the pericardial sac.
If there was blood in the pericardial sac, it would cause inability of the heart to expand, and therefore it wouldn't be able to fill up with blood to pump elsewhere in the body.
Okay. And what effect would that have, the inability of the heart to pump blood elsewhere in the body?
Well, blood would not be pumped to the brain, and that at some point consciousness would be lost. Blood would not be going to the kidneys or to the other major organs.
Over what amount of time would it require to lose consciousness?
To this being hypothetical, talking about time of death, I think you should get more concrete.
Okay. To the extent that this would have an impact on the heart's ability to pump blood and as a result cause loss of consciousness, how would that occur?
The heart would not, the ventricle of the heart's left heart would not be able to fill up. And because it can't fill up, blood can't enter it to be ejected. Ergo, someone would finally lose consciousness over seconds and would not be able to perform purposeful activity.
Okay. And with regard to this injury, you said once it perforated the pericardium, did it hit some portion of the heart?
Yes, it grazed the posterior heart.
And what effect would a bullet hitting that part of the heart have on the human body?
It could cause bleeding into the pericardial sac. It would cause injury to the conduction system of the heart.
What is the conduction system of the heart?
The heart requires that electrical impulses occur at sequential times. There are centers of the heart. There's one right where the atria meets the ventricles. There's one inside the heart on the septum, and then there are centers of conduction on the outside and to the apex of the bottom of the heart. When you tear the heart and you cause the impulses to arrive at the bottom of the heart, so to speak, at a much later time or not at all because of the tear, then the heart can't beat effectively. If there was, well, excuse me, I've answered the question.
Okay. And after it had struck that area of the heart, where did the bullet go from there?
It went through the other side of the pericardium and diaphragm.
Okay. And after it went through those areas, where did it go?
It went through the left lobe of the liver, traveling towards the back, and then went into the muscle of the back, in some way dislocating the 12th rib, right, the spinal column, at the vertebral column, and went through the muscle of the back.
Okay. And after going through the muscle of the back, did it exit the body?
Yes, it did.
So did you recover any projectile or shrapnel from that projectile?
Yes. Excuse me. No, I did not.
Okay. And with regard, so I've asked you some questions about the direction or the path that Roman numeral 1, gunshot 1, and gunshot 2, right and left chest. Were either of those gunshot wounds independently fatal?
The gunshot wound to the right chest would not be rapidly fatal, but it would be fatal. The gunshot wound to the left chest would be rapidly fatal.
Okay, when you refer to being rapidly fatal, what do you mean?
Seconds to minutes.
Now, going to gunshot wound to the abdomen, Roman numeral number 3, you indicated that from your external examination, you observed an entrance wound,
Yes.
and then later did you conduct an internal examination and follow the path of the projectile through the body of Odenoid?
Yes.
Just describe what you observed.
It went through the skin and lateral abdominal wall on the right side, and then it disrupted the right lobe of the liver and disrupted the right kidney. The wound path continued into more soft tissue towards the back.
Okay. Was there a corresponding exit wound for this Roman numeral 3 gunshot wound of the abdomen?
No.
Okay. Were you able to recover then a projectile in the body of Odenoid?
Yes.
And when you recovered that projectile, did you do something with it?
Yes, after it was diagrammed and images were taken of it, it was placed into an envelope.
Okay. And at some point, was that turned over to a state trooper involved in this case?
Yes.
Now, going to gunshot wound of the clavicle, Roman numeral number 4, you described your observations and not being able to determine whether it was an entrance or an exit wound. Is that true?
That's correct.
And that was based on the limited amount of tissue in that area?
One of the reasons, yes.
Okay. Were there other reasons?
There was breakdown from the body starting to decompose.
Okay. And let me ask you about that. When you, with regard, can you describe what happens to the body once a person has died? Is there an initial stage of decomposition that begins?
Yes.
Okay, and just describe what happens.
The things that are pretty straightforward, such as settling of the blood or lividity, occurs. Then there is stiffening of the muscles from some of the chemical reactions. Pretty straightforward. Then
Let me just interrupt you for a moment. You say the stiffening. Is there a name for that?
it's rigor.
Okay. And,
There's
and if you
rigor
just
of the
describe
muscle.
I'm sorry. And what is rigor mortis?
Yes.
And just if you would describe what that is.
Chemicals in the muscle are depleted, and ergo the muscle tightens up. It doesn't relax. And over a course of a day or so, it becomes very marked, very apparent in the larger muscle groups of the body. And then at its peak, it starts to decrease, and eventually, because the muscle itself is breaking down, the rigor mortis just dissipates, and you can move the muscles more easily.
Okay. So this period of time that you're describing where there's stiffening and then at some point becoming unstiff.
Yes.
What period of time does rigor occur over?
It usually starts immediately, but it's not, or essentially starts immediately. However, it's not noticed because it's not occurring in large muscle groups. It takes a while for that to be apparent, over a course of hours. It's supposed to reach a peak at approximately 12 hours or more.
Okay. When you say a peak at 12 hours or more, is that peak with regard to stiffness?
Stiffness, yes.
Okay. And what about over a time of approximately 14 hours would you expect to see rigor having either peaking or being near peak?
It would be near peaking or peaking.
Now, you also described there are other, in the initial stages of decomposition, is there something that's related to this, some effect that occurs on the skin?
Because the skin is not viable and the body is losing temperature, actually is losing a high temperature and going to a lower temperature, it starts to break down, and you might get slippage or a situation where if you apply too much pressure to the skin, it can tear, and superficial layers of the skin can break from the underlying connective tissue.
Okay. Can temperature have an impact on how quickly slippage of the skin will occur?
Yes, it can.
And when you were conducting your autopsy, did you note any slippage of the skin on the body of Odenoid?
Yes.
And in what areas or to what extent?
It was on the torso and extremities.
And would that be indicative of a certain amount of time that the body had been decomposing or begun to decompose, as well as have any significance with regard to the temperature the body was exposed to?
It provides a very rough estimate.
Okay. And just if you could describe over what sort of time would you begin to see slippage of the skin?
In a very hot room, maybe over hours. On the ground outside, depending on how much coverage there was from trees and bushes, also depending on how much exposure to the sun, the time of the year, whether the dryness or the moisture in the air can all affect slippage.
Okay. With regard to its effect, with regard to a temperature of approximately 70 to 80, like a June day, what effect would that have on when slippage might begin?
It could occur within hours.
Now, with regard to the gunshot wound at the clavicle, you indicated you couldn't determine entrance or exit in terms of directionality. Were you able to follow the path of that injury through the body of Odenoid?
Yes.
Okay, and just describe, if you would, just starting from the front, the clavicle, what you noted.
It went through the skin and some soft tissue. That went through the muscle on the right side of the neck and the back of the neck. It then went through muscle in the posterior right back.
Okay. And yeah, when it went through the muscle in the posterior right back, did you see another wound to the skin?
Yes, I did.
And were you able to recover a projectile relating to this injury between the clavicle and that area of the right back?
No.
Now, with regard to gunshot wound, you had described gunshot wound to the back, Roman numeral number 5. Were you able to determine whether that was an entrance or an exit?
That was an entrance.
Okay. And this was the one, I think you had put your hand up over your shoulder to point to it?
Yes.
Okay. And were you able to then track the directionality of this wound through the body of Odenoid?
Yes.
And just tell us where did that wound go?
This wound went under the skin through muscle. It then crossed over from the right side of the body to the left side. It caused fractures of the spinous processes, thoracic vertebrae 9 and 10, and then stopped in the lower left back.
Okay. When you say the spinal process, can you just describe that area?
It's in the center of the back. It's in the midline. Judging from my size, excuse me. May I stand up?
Court's permission.
I'm pointing on my back, the center of the back, and where the where the vertebral column is.
And so if you would, just from where you saw the entrance, where you had pointed before, if you could use one hand to point that location and your other hand to show the,
For the purpose of the court, I'm now pointing to my lower back in the center. And I'm now moving it over to the right and to the left. And, there's a back in the midline, there's an exit, and then in the left back, there is a bullet underlying soft tissue.
okay, so just from where you had described the entrance, the right shoulder and the back.
Yes.
Okay, if you would just show us, where did the bullet go, where did it wind up, following that path from the upper right shoulder?
Approximately 20 inches below, or 20 inches below the top of the head, and in the skin of the left lower back, approximately 3 inches or so from the midline of the back.
Okay. Thank you. And then lastly, you had indicated there was a entrance wound on the posterior part of the right forearm.
Yes.
Can you just, did you do an internal examination of the forearm?
Yes.
Of Odenoid? And just tell us what path that bullet followed.
It went through skin and soft tissue. It caused fracturing of the ulnar bone, and it continued through muscle and exited the forearm anteriorly.
Okay. And so the exit wound, when you say anteriorly, was on that inner side of the forearm?
Yes.
Was any projectile recovered?
No.
Now, with regard to all of these wounds that you've described, what, if any, feeling of pain would one note suffering these types of injuries?
Well, the skin has nerves, obviously. There are nerves within the organs, on surfaces of the organs, and in the organs themselves, such as the muscle has nerves surrounding it, so that if there's swelling, you would feel muscle discomfort or pain. You would also feel pain from swelling or tearing of tissue with the liver and the kidneys. So there would be pain.
Okay. What about some of the fractures of bones that you've described? What, if any, pain would somebody feel suffering injuries of those of that nature?
Well, the ribs or whatever bone, when they fracture, they move and they may pinch nerves that travel below the ribs, on the undersurface of the ribs, or in muscle groups, right in that area. Other bone may pinch nerves elsewhere in the body.
Oh, I'm sorry, Your Honor.
These are ones that are in evidence.
They are in evidence, Your Honor. Sir, I'm just going to show you some, you indicated where photos taken during the course of the autopsy.
Yes.
I'm just going to show you what's previously been marked 202A. ask you if you recognize this is the body of Odin.
Yes.
Let me just remind you, as I told you before, that when you look at photographs that have been or will be introduced in evidence, please do not allow your verdict to be influenced in any way by the fact that some of the photographs may be unpleasant or graphic. The defendant is entitled to a verdict based solely on the evidence and not one based on sympathy or pity that might be occasioned by a photograph. Consider these exhibits only as they may draw attention to a clinical medical status or to the nature of any injuries. You may proceed.
Thank you. Sir, do you see the two injuries you described as the gunshot wounds to the right and left chest of Odin?
Yes,
And both of those were entry wounds?
that's correct.
So I'm showing you now what's been marked 202B. Just going to orient it this way. Do you recognize this wound, sir?
Yes.
And which wound is this?
This is the wound at the clavicle.
And you indicated you were unable, because of the nature of the tissue, to be able to say whether it was entrance or exit. Is that true?
Yes.
I'm showing you now 202C. You recognize, I'm going with this, you recognize this wound, sir?
Yes, I do.
And what wound is this?
This is a gunshot wound to the right side of the abdomen.
And earlier you had described slippage of the skin. Do you see any slippage present in this photograph?
Yes.
So now showing, putting on the overhead 203A. Do you recognize this, sir?
Yes, I do.
And what do you recognize this to be?
That is a gunshot wound on the front or anterior surface of the right forearm.
And I could just jump to 203C. Do you recognize that as the corresponding injury on the posterior aspect of the of Mr. Lloyd's right forearm?
Yes.
And is that the entrance wound?
This is a picture of the entrance wound.
And this other one, the exit?
Correct.
So I'm just going to show you what's marked 204C. Recognize what's depicted in this photograph.
Yes, I do.
What area of the body is this?
This is a picture of Mr. Lloyd's back. It's his right back is at the inferior portion of the photograph. So we're actually looking at the right back for the most part.
Okay. Now I'm just going to, do you see some of the gunshot wounds that you described on the back of Odin Lloyd?
Yes.
Just beginning right here, so towards his head and neck area. Just which, you recognize this wound?
Yes, I do.
What wound was this?
This is the wound that correlates with the gunshot wound at the clavicle on the right side.
Okay, so the clavicle was the collarbone area,
Yes.
and as you indicated, it had traveled, is that a relatively short distance?
Yes.
And was any projectile recovered in this area?
No.
This next injury here,
Yes.
okay, you recognize it?
Yes.
Did it have a corresponding entrance wound? I beg your pardon. You recognize this as what type of wound?
That was a entrance wound.
And you described before the entrance wound to the upper right back. Is that this wound?
Yes.
And you further described then a path through the body. Where did this go?
It went under the skin through muscle and then terminated, the wound path terminated in the The left lower back, under the skin.
Okay, and that was a projectile recovered in that area?
That's correct.
Okay. I'm just going to direct your attention down to this area here. Do you see that area? The lower back now?
Yes, I do.
I'm just going to direct your attention to this area here, sir.
Yes.
Okay. Now, if I could just go to 204A, ask you if that shows a close-up of that.
Yes.
No, I'm sorry, I'm going to just orient it.
Yes.
Okay. Can you see the projectile that you ultimately recovered from this wound traveling, as you indicated, entrance wound traveling through the body down to the lower back?
Unfortunately, I can't.
Okay. And with regard to this area here, sir, do you see, were you able to recover the projectile from that area?
Yes.
Okay, and that area, that projectile, were you able to track that from where it had entered the body?
Yes.
And where had it entered?
That would entered on the right side of the abdomen.
Okay, so that was the right side. So is there any notation in the skin for the bullet that came from the upper right part of the back shoulder? All right, let me just put it back to here. Is there any, were you able to make any observations without actually recovering it from inside the body of Odin?
No, I had to recover the bullet.
Okay. Now, just going to this wound here, what is this, sir?
That is a gunshot exit wound.
Okay, and was there a corresponding entrance wound?
Yes.
And which wound was that?
That was from the gunshot wound to the right anterior chest adjacent to the nipple.
Okay. I'm just going to show you this here. Is that corresponding to this this wound, the gunshot wound here?
Yes.
And now, as I had shown you before, down the lower back area, did you make observations of this injury?
Yes.
And did that have a corresponding wound to it?
Yes,
Was
it
this
did.
In the lower back here, was this a entrance or exit?
That's an exit.
And where was the corresponding entrance wound?
On the left anterior chest, again adjacent or in the area of the left nipple.
Okay, and is this just a close-up? This is 204A, close-up of that exit wound in the lower back.
Yes.
I'm just going to show you now this injury here. Is that the left entrance wound corresponding with that exit wound?
That's correct.
So this is just 204B. Does that show just a close-up of the difference between the entrance and the exits?
Yes.
Now, sir, I asked you about the two chest wounds, whether either was independently fatal. Were any of those other 4 gunshot wounds you've described independently fatal?
The gunshot wound to the right abdomen, which resulted in injury to the right kidney and liver, that would have been fatal, rapidly fatal.
And again, rapidly fatal meaning how long?
Seconds to minutes.
So out of the 6, you've indicated how many in total were independently fatal, fatal gunshot wounds?
Three.
And with regard to those 6 injuries, the onset of death was what? Or would be what? Suffering those types of injuries?
Objection, actually injury.
It would be on the outside minutes.
And just in terms of the mechanism, having an individual suffering those types of gunshot wounds, what would the mechanism of death be? What would ultimately lead to the death?
It may be cardiac irregularity or dysrhythmias to the heart. It could be bleeding into the chest, could be bleeding into the abdomen, and could be bleeding into the pericardial sac.
Okay, arrhythmias to the heart, what is that?
That infers that the electrical system of the heart has been injured.
Based on your internal examination, your external examination, and at some point did you also review toxicology reports?
Yes, I did.
And based on your examination during the course of your autopsy, considering all of those things, with regard to, were you able to determine to a reasonable degree of certainty, as a forensic pathologist, the cause of death for Odin Lloyd?
Yes.
Okay, and what was the cause of death for Odin Lloyd?
That Mr. Lloyd died as a result of injuries to the heart, the lungs, the liver, and kidney. And this was due to gunshot wounds of the torso.
Now, sir, at the autopsy, did you also recover other items that were turned over to the state police?
Yes.
And what other items did you recover during the course of the autopsy of Odin Lloyd?
Paper bags that were covering the hands, both hands, fingernail clippings, head hair, bear with me please, blood, and at the office we had also taken x-rays. The x-rays and blood were retained at our office. Blood, bags, hair, and fingernail clippings were submitted to the state police.
And so with regard to the directionality, were you able to determine the directionality of the projectiles through the body of Odin Lloyd?
Yes.
And when I say directionality, do you make findings whether it is front to back, upward, downward, left to right?
I describe paths in the body as to his right to his left, or his left to his right, upward towards the head or downward towards the feet, and then back to front as to whether it's from his abdomen to his back or his back to his abdomen.
Okay. And were you able to do that with regard to the injuries, the gunshot wounds, the 6 gunshot wounds that you found on the body of Odin Lloyd?
To 5 of them, yes.
Okay. And Your Honor, with the court's permission, if you'd be allowed to approach the mannequin to indicate the directionality of the wounds to the body.
Well, Your Honor, at this point, I object. I think we've done that twice already now.
Objections are open.
Thank you. Sir, if you would, please. Sir, if I could first have you just, if you would, place, if we could just go by Roman numeral number 1, as you've described, just place a similar numbered sticker, and I'm just going to give you a red number 1. If you place it for the entrance wound. Okay. And with regard to, I think you indicated you were able to determine the exit wound on the body. Is that true?
Yes.
And if you would, I'm just going to give you a yellow, just representing the exit. If you would place that in the location of the exit wound for Roman numeral number 1. Okay. And sir, if you could, I'm going to first just hand you this pointer and ask you just to show us, or first point to the area of the entrance. Okay, and if you could maybe just Let me turn this sideways. Not to do that. Okay. Now, if you could, if you just use that pointer and try and show the directionality with the pointer aligning those 2 points, please.
I believe it was slightly upward and front to back.
Okay, I'm just going to ask you to keep your voice up so we all can hear you. When you say it was what
I
direction?
believe it was front to back. It may have been slightly upward.
Okay. Now, I'm going to ask you to do the same thing, if you would, as to Roman numeral gunshot wound number 2, which was of the left chest. You would place the red dot in that location. And if you would, with the corresponding yellow dot for the exit wound. Okay, and now could you show us, please, the directionality from the entrance to the exit of gunshot wound to the left chest?
Front to back and downward.
Okay. And now this time, with regard to downward, approximately what angle is that?
I'm going to say approximately 45 degrees.
Okay. Now, with regard to the entrance, number 3, Roman numeral number 3, right abdomen, if you would place that in the location, let me move my mannequin, hold that down. Okay. I'm sorry, is that right?
That's the left.
Okay. And if you would, well, was there an exit wound corresponding to the right flank entrance wound?
No, there was no exit.
Okay. Where did you recover the projectile for the entrance wound number 3 into the right abdomen?
Bear with me, I'm going to just look carefully. It exited in that, I'm sorry, excuse me. It went into the body almost parallel and was recovered in soft tissue near the back.
Okay. So with regard to, it would be right to left. What about in terms of up or down or front to back?
It was slightly upward. Okay. It went into 24 inches and was recovered approximately 22 inches, 20 inches.
Okay. And with regard to now number 4, which I believe you indicated was is that the clavicle?
That's right.
Okay, I'm going to give you that. If you would please place that in the area where you observed the entrance wound.
I could not determine the entrance site for...
I beg your pardon. I'm sorry. If you would just, we have, I have a green sticker. I'm going to give that to you. If you would just put it at the location representing one of the injuries. And ask you to do the same with this green one for where you saw the corresponding. Okay. So now I'm just going to turn. Can you just show us now the directionality of those 2 wounds? And again, without knowing which was entrance or exit, you can't determine whether it's front to back or back to front.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, with regard to number 5, where was number 5 located? Okay. And that represents entrance or exit?
That represents entrance.
Okay, and were you able to recover, did you find a corresponding exit wound for number 5?
No.
Okay. Did you recover a projectile from the body of Odin Lloyd corresponding to number 5?
Yes.
And where was that found, sir?
Underneath the skin, on the left side, in approximately the same area as the exit. And I've just pointed to the mannequin in that area for the purposes of the court.
Okay, and if you would, sir, could you use the pointer to show us the angle that projectile followed through the body of Odin Lloyd? And ultimately, it obviously didn't come out, so to the location where you found it, approximately there?
Yes.
Okay. And with regard now to the last gunshot wound that you noted on the body of Odin Lloyd, is that in the area of the forearm?
Yes.
Okay, could you place this red number 6 on the entrance? Okay, and if you do the same thing for a corresponding exit wound that you've already described. Okay, and just in terms of directionality, sir, can you just show with the pointer? Let me turn it. Okay, so were they roughly even, or was there some?
There was something, I believe there was some deviation slightly upward.
Okay, thank you. And so, sir, does this represent now the mannequin's current condition, absent the 2 projectiles that were in the body, the injuries that you noted to the back of Odin Lloyd?
In approximate areas, yes.
Okay, and the forearm?
Yes.
And also then the front?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you, sir. We can resume the same. May I approach your honor, please? Sure, I'm just going to sort of just show you it's pretty marked as exhibit number 67. Do you recognize this item as being consistent with one of the projectiles you recovered the autopsy of Odin Lloyd?
Yes.
So I showed you 67, I'll show you 66. I'm showing you this other item. Do you recognize that as being consistent with the items recovered from the body of Odin Lloyd?
Yes.
I could have one moment here, please. Excuse me. I have nothing further. Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon, Dr. Zane.
Good afternoon.
So, sir, you've told us, based on your autopsy, that the cause of death in this case was gunshot wounds that caused various injuries internally, right?
Yes.
Okay. But your autopsy can't tell us anything about who caused those injuries, can it?
That's right.
Okay. And you told us that there were 6 bullet wounds in this case, right?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell us to a reasonable degree of medical certainty whether those 6 wounds were caused by 6 different bullets? That is, were there 6 well, I guess that's the question. Were those 6, can you tell us to a reasonable degree of medical certainty whether those 6 wounds were caused by 6 different bullets?
No.
Okay. Now, am I correct, Dr. Zane, that if a person is alive and the person is bleeding, that there will be clotting of the blood?
Yes.
Okay. And why is that?
There's a response by different cells in the blood, platelets, which aren't cells, but fragments of cells. They go to an area to slow down bleeding, and there's also factors that are secreted by the liver, which start a coagulation pyramid, so to speak.
So that's a natural process in all living human beings, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, you indicated in direct examination that I think you said approximately 1.5 cups of blood was you found inside Mr. Lloyd's right and left chest cavity, right?
Yes.
Okay. And am I correct that you found an additional, I think, 100 to 200 milliliters of blood inside the abdominal cavity?
Yes.
Okay. And so that's less than a liter altogether, right?
That's correct.
Okay. And there's nothing in your notes or in your autopsy report indicating that any of that blood was clotted, correct?
Correct.
Now, you told us on direct examination that several of the injuries suffered by Mr. Lloyd would cause death, I think you said, from seconds to minutes, right?
That's right.
Okay. But those wounds could cause unconsciousness before death, right?
Yes.
And from a medical standpoint, as far as we know, a person doesn't feel pain when they are unconscious or when they are deceased, right?
I'd ask that be broken into 2 questions.
Okay. I'll be happy to separate it. As far as we know, Dr. Zane, does an individual suffer conscious pain when he or she is unconscious?
No.
Okay. And as far as we know, scientifically, does a person suffer conscious pain when he or she is deceased?
No.
Now, are you aware, Dr. Zane, that Mr. Lloyd's body was found on the early evening of June 17th, 2013?
Yes.
Okay. And am I correct that Mr. Lloyd's body was brought to the office of the chief medical examiner that night in Boston?
Yes.
Okay. And you told us on direct examination that you conducted Mr. Lloyd's autopsy on June 19th, right?
I believe 18, please.
Can you look at your report, please, and tell us when you conducted the autopsy?
That says 19.
Is that correct, Dr. Zane, that you did it on the 19th, or is that incorrect?
It represents the date of the autopsy.
So you did it on the 19th. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And you conducted, but you didn't conduct Mr. Lloyd's autopsy at the office of the chief medical examiner in Boston, right?
That's right.
You did it on Cape Cod, right?
Yes.
So Mr. Lloyd's body, which had been at the office of the chief medical examiner in Boston on the night of the 17th, was transported to Cape Cod so you could do the autopsy there on the 19th, right?
In actuality,
Well, am I right, sir, that it was transported to Cape Cod on the 19th, sir?
yes.
Okay. Can you tell us why the autopsy was not performed in Boston, sir, where his body had been initially brought?
I object to this. Personal.
Your knowledge, your personal knowledge.
Yes.
Okay, tell us why.
It was a Cape Cod case, so it was a Cape Cod doctor.
It was a Cape Cod case? Is that your testimony?
Bristol County is covered by Cape Cod.
Well, sir, there are plenty of times when autopsies are conducted on bodies from other parts of Massachusetts in Boston, right?
That's right.
Okay. Is it fair to say that it was done for your convenience, sir?
I object, Your Honor.
No.
Now, you conducted your autopsy on June 19th, 2013, right?
Yes.
Okay. And am I correct, sir, that your autopsy report was dated January 10th, 2014?
Yes.
Some 6 months later?
Yes.
Is that consistent with your regular practice, sir? To have a 6-month delay between the autopsy and the report?
Currently, yes.
Thank you, Doctor. One more. Anything at the moment? Thank you, Doctor.
Sir, just with regard to the questioning about the clotting, what amount of time does it take before the body begins to clot?
It takes minutes.
Okay. So the absence of any clotting didn't strike you as being unusual or inconsistent with your own determination that death could have occurred within minutes?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Nothing further?
Am I excused?
Your Honor, that would conclude the presentation of the Commonwealth's evidence. We would rest.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you again, as I have often, to please keep your mind suspended, to please continue to avoid anything at all about this case or Mr. Hernandez that may appear in a newspaper or on television or any other media, or that may appear in Facebook or Twitter or any form of social media. Please continue to avoid speaking or emailing, texting, or in any way communicating with anyone at all, including each other, about this case or Mr. Hernandez. And if anyone starts any type of communication with you or your jury service or Mr. Hernandez, please end it immediately. Please do not do any research about the case, Mr. Hernandez, or anything you think might be relevant to the case. Now, we're not going to have a session at all tomorrow, so you will have a long holiday weekend. We will resume on Monday, and I expect that the case will go to the jury sometime next week. Once you are deliberating, then you'll be excused each day that you are deliberating at about 4:30, unless you as a group advise the court that you wish to stay later. I'm going to ask you to please be extra vigilant this holiday weekend. You may be visiting friends or family or have guests over to your home, and this case may be mentioned or your jury service may be mentioned. So please be extra careful. Resist any temptation to talk to anyone at all, no matter how close they may be to you, about this case or your jury service. Resist the temptation to respond to any question or any at all about the case or your jury service or Mr. Hernandez. If anyone attempts to raise it, then cut off the conversation immediately. Walk out of the room. Do not let yourself be drawn into any conversation or be in a situation where you're overhearing anything that anyone else may think about this case. Please don't solicit anyone else's opinions. You are going to have the case, I believe, next week, and you will be deciding the case, and we're not interested in what anyone else may think about this case. So please make every effort to avoid discussions or hearing about the case or talking about the case on this weekend, where you may be encountering more people, including more family members, than you might on a regular weekend. Have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you on Monday.
He. All persons having anything further to do before the Honorable, the Justice E. Susan Gosh of the Superior Court, now sitting at Fall River within and for the Commonwealth, depart and give your attendance here Monday morning at 9 a.m., to which time and place the sitting of this court is now adjourned. God save the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Court is now adjourned.
I'd like to file a written motion for required finding along with the memorandum. I would request an opportunity to be able to argue this tomorrow. I'm also at this time filing the defendant's request for jury instructions. Your Honor, with respect to scheduling, a third thing, I think now that the Commonwealth has rested, we can finalize our witness list. And I think we can, if the court wants to tomorrow, depending on how much time the court has, in addition, if the matters that the court could take up tomorrow, in addition to these two, there's a pending motion with respect to the, whether or not Dr. Greenblatt will be permitted to testify, and if the court wishes to, we could take that up tomorrow as well.
Probably before I take up the jury instructions. Commonwealth have any requests for jury instructions they're going to submit?
Not at this time, Your Honor. Could we try and get you something this afternoon?
Sure.
Thank you.
We'll resume then tomorrow at 9, and we have until 1.
Would all rise?
Yes, please.